Hi guys, I finally got around to testing the Energy Shield Grim Feast version of Skeletal Reavers, and I have to say, if scaled correctly, it is considerably stronger and safer than the original Mind Over Matter Eldritch Battery version. However, I feel that the Mind Over Matter build scales sort of more linearly as you go, and it's easier to get incremental upgrades and it feel good, while the Energy Shield version scales like kind of exponentially. Like all the pieces and passive points compound together to get you a really powerful build. In other words, the Energy Shield version scales slowly until it just goes crazy in the end game. So before getting into more details on how to do the switch, here is the basic summary. I still recommend leveling and progressing through the game with the Mind Over Matter Eldritch Battery version, as I think it's a lot simpler to scale and it just feels quite comfortable. However, I do think I would switch, or definitely would recommend switching to the Energy Shield version, probably around character level 85 with waystones around like sort of level 13, 14, because at that point, monsters start dealing a lot of damage and gain the extra effective health pool through the Energy Shield version is going to be useful. And also at that point, you finally have enough passive points and currency to invest into purchasing some solid Energy Shield pieces to make the most of the Energy Shield version. Also, the Energy Shield version is much more passive points starved. There's a lot more clusters that you want to be picking up for the Energy Shield, which is quite stark contrast to the Mind Over Matter build, where by level 90 there's almost nothing else to pick up on the tree and you're kind of like picking up really boring stuff. With the Energy Shield version, you really want to pick up a bunch of stuff, so it's quite tricky, which is also why it's better the higher level you are. However, just before we get into the details, I will caveat all of this by saying that, in my opinion, the Energy Shield Grim Feast combination that is so popular in Path of Exile 2 at the moment is way too strong. It's definitely too strong for how easy it is to get it going, and I have no doubt that GGG have it in their sights. So keep that in mind, because I'm pretty confident that in the future this will likely not be quite as strong. I don't know how much weaker it's going to be, but I'm almost certain it will be weaker a month from now or so. Anyway, now let's talk about the trade-offs and the differences between the Mind Over Matter versus the Energy Shield version. So from my testing and from doing the switch, we lose the following things by doing the switch. We lose approximately 60 to 90 spirit, which in my case was approximately 3 Reavers, so I went from 18 to 15. We lose a few damage nodes, which means that our Reavers do a little bit less damage. For me, this was about 7% sheet DPS. I don't know how much a real DPS that is, but you can assume something like between 7 to 10%. We lose a bunch of health and chaos res nodes for minions. This means that the minions are effectively a lot less tanky and they do die. In the Mind Over Matter build, the minions, once you scaled properly, they basically never die. In this version, they will occasionally die when they get slammed with some big hit and stuff. But you do have your clerics, so they do resurrect them. It's not a big deal, but if you're not used to this, your minions will die a little bit more. We also lose a few mana nodes, so our mana regen is going to go down. It's not very relevant because, we don't really care about this anymore in the Energy Shield build. And we have smaller chaos damage effective health pool. So chaos damage bypasses Energy Shield, which means any chaos damage we get will just go straight to our health or mana, if we're still using Mind Over Matter. And it will skip the Energy Shield, which means that we actually technically have a smaller effective health pool for chaos damage. However, there's not actually all that much chaos damage in the game, so it's actually all right. I didn't find that to be too annoying. And anyway, and in return for giving up all of those things, we get an insane effective health pool. So in the Mind Over Matter version, I had about 1k HP with about 3k mana, giving us like 4k total. While in the Energy Shield version, you have like 1k HP, 1k mana, and easily about 12k Energy Shield while mapping. Honestly, you can scale that up to even like 20k. So you have an effective health for like 3 to 4 times larger than the Mind Over Matter version, which is crazy. It means you can take 4 times as big of a hit before dying. So that's very, very good. And as much as it pains me to say it, I have to admit this is a very worthy trade-off. And in the end game, you should really be looking at the Energy Shield version to stop yourself from dying in the maps when you get surrounded. So let's just quickly talk specifics, exactly what you need to change to be able to use the Energy Shield version. So, first of all, very important, you need to switch your armor to an Energy Shield based one with as much Energy Shield as possible. I'll be showing my old and new armor because armors get the most Energy Shield possible, and that flat Energy Shield is very, very important to scale your maximum Energy Shield. So that's definitely an armor piece you want to be changing. You will also need to update your tree. Obviously, you will unassign probably around 30 or so nodes and assign them to energy shield related ones. I won't go into the details of all of them exactly here, but I will be posting a link to a new Mobalytics tree that will have this energy shield one that I've put together. So if you want to do the respec, you can just use that as a reference point. You can compare it with the old mind over matter one if you want. The link is still the same. Also will be in the description down below. But yeah, basically you need to respec about 30 points, so you probably need to set aside, 200,000 gold, something like that. Third point, you want to add Grim Feast gem. That'll cost you 30 spirit points, super important. Fourth point, you need to remove Lifetap from vulnerability. If you weren't using it, doesn't matter. I was using it, but obviously at this point I don't need to anymore. I can just use the mana much better. Number 5, we need to change the Annoint. We don't need the Arcane Blossom anymore. I would recommend the safest, easiest option is probably Flashy Deflection, and it's quite cheap as well. However, there's a bunch you could consider. It's really not all that important. There's a bunch of like energy shield ones. There's some minion defense ones with the chaos rest if minions dying too often. Just sharing some examples above. You can check those out. You can just look around the tree. Like, this is really not something super important, so you can just have a look. Choose something that you think would be good for your build and what you're currently lacking. And finally, another definite thing we need to do is we need to update the Ascendency. So obviously we had the plus mana from Life Ascendency in the mana build. We switched that to the energy shield one in this new build. Additionally, there's a couple of more sort of optional changes you can make, but still recommended. So first of all, in addition to the armor, which is an absolute must-have, you probably will want to upgrade a bunch of your gear. I didn't, like for all the showcases that you can see, I only upgraded my armor and I was still basically unkillable, so that was the only thing I needed to change in my build. But to really optimize it, you would probably update all of your slots, your gloves, helmet, boots as well, to be energy shield based and have some extra energy shield on them, because you also don't need all the max mana modifiers that we had on the gear in the Mind Over Matter build. So yeah, you probably will want to upgrade your gear over time from like max mana to energy shield. However, like I mentioned in the showcase, the only key piece that you need to immediately do before you switch to this build is the armor piece. Everything else, the chest piece, everything else can just sort of take its time, so don't worry about it too much. Second of all, this is up to you. You can consider unspecking Mind Over Matter, or you can leave it as is. I actually unspec'd Eldritch Battery, obviously, because we do want to have energy shield, but I kept Mind Over Matter anyway, just to have a higher effective health for 4 chaos damage, which bypasses energy shield. And the build doesn't use very much mana anyway, so the downside of Mind Over Matter of the lower recovery is not as big of a deal for me. So I was happy with just having this. If you're struggling with mana regen and mana recovery, you can just unspec Mind Over Matter as well and just go for straight energy shield build. And finally, something else to consider, you might want to prioritize chaos resistance a little bit more in this build, because again, we have a lower effective health for 4 chaos damage, so you really want to try and cap that chaos res. And that's about it. That's everything you really need to do. I don't think it's actually a particularly difficult switch. There were quite a few points, but most of them literally take a few seconds to do. I wrapped up the whole switch in under 10 minutes. And 10 minutes, I paid a 30x for an armor piece or something like that, and I felt way stronger, so definitely worth it. If you're already level 85 or so and you're doing the Mind Over Matter Reavers, I can certainly recommend switching to this Energy Shield Grim Feast based version, at least for now, unless it sees a massive nerf hammer, which it might, and then we'll worry about it and maybe put up a different version. Anyway, as mentioned, link to the new tree for Energy Shield can be in the description down below. I'm also going to link the original guide so you can use that as a reference for comparing the trees. And yeah, that's basically all I have for you today, guys. So thanks very much for watching. I hope you're still going to enjoy the build. It's even more powerful. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. And I'll see you in the next video, which, by the way, is going to be a Detonate Dead Bone Storm Blood Mage I'm working on. That's my next build. I'm really enjoying it so far. Already blowing up T16s and bosses. Very fun. That's going to be the next one coming. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in a couple of days. So I hope you tune in for that as well. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.